Well, hello and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me. Well, I tell you what I love about this show is moments of indulgence. And the person who helped me through my childhood is here today, the wonderful, from Thunderbirds to Wonderbird, it is Dee Anderson and my lovely friend Dawn. How are you,
Hello, hi.
Hi, Andrew.
Oh,
and hi, Dawn.
And thank
Hello,
you.
Dee. How are you, darling?
Very good, darling. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really good, thank you.
Good.
On this really
You look
drizzly,
very-
wet, awful day.
I know, you're very glamorous with your long blonde hair, darling.
Yeah, well, you know, you have to make an effort occasionally.
It's got to be good.
And you, Andrew, with your fabulous hair.
Well, thank you. And most of it's real, which is good as well.
I know.
Only most of it.
Down. Well, I have absolutely been loving Wonderbirds because what you do, you're bringing to the nation. You're dealing with real issues, and also you're entertaining.
Yes.
Yesterday's episode was superb because you touched on
Thank
all
you.
sorts of really important issues, didn't you?
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. And I think it started off as just four mates talking. And then there was a need for it because, you know, it's a bit like during World War II, apparently, you know, like the land girls. It's with, you know, the backbone. You need somebody, a support mechanism, don't you, with people. A lot of people are on their own, you see, in lockdown. A lot of women, especially, you know, like a slightly over 25 mature women I'm talking about.
Well, no, I understand, and it's never too late to be who you might have been.
Exactly.
And may or may not have said. But what I love about your career as well, I mean, just putting it in perspective, and you must be almost tired of it, I guess, when people sort of talk about Sylvia and Gerry Anderson were your parents. You grew up originally in Mississippi. Before coming over here, but it actually wasn't your parents who did Thunderbirds and all those Glorious Stingray and all that sort of thing. It was actually your grandfather, wasn't he, who was a prize fighter?
That's right. Wow, Andrew, that's amazing. Because this is it. I think this is why we're here today with Thunder, because I think my mother was such a fighter as well. And in those days, you know, females, they didn't really have a voice. And all of her creations, because it was her, she created all the characters and the storylines. And, you know, my father was great with the hardware, with all the vehicles and the sci-fi, you know, and that's where the team came together. But you're right, because it was my grandfather who was one of the first boxers at the ring at Blackfriars, and he was called Tiger Thomas.
Tiger Thomas, come on.
Come on, get in there.
And he gave you your fighting spirit, is what you're attributed as saying.
Yes, and my mother's and mine, because, you know, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and he was always saying to me, at that, you know, ahead of his time, always said, doesn't matter if you're a woman. I mean, it would be deemed as very un-PC these days, what he would say, but he said, doesn't matter if you're a woman, you can do what you like. You know, you could stand up to guys. And so that was a great thing to grow up with, you know, and so you feel it's the confidence of knowing that you can do stuff and not be, you know, be questioned about it.
And that's the real thrill. I mean, other things, and I have a lot of guests on this show who have very famous parents, and everybody assumes, wrongly in most cases, that you're incredibly rich as a result of it. It's all just down to them. Actually, you're a self-made person. You did it in property and things like that. You're a fantastic musician. I've been listening to the album as well. And it's in your own right, isn't it?
Oh, yes, completely. And I mean, I think, you know, I started out wanting to be an actress, which I did. And my parents didn't want me to do that because they actually wanted me to be a continuity girl, is what they called them in those days. So, and I was very unobservant, and I thought I'd be terrible. So I actually got into drama school and got a full scholarship without telling them, and then said, look, I'm going, and you don't even have to pay. And they went, well, okay, you must really want to do this, you know.
And sometimes you find children change their name so they don't get lumbered, if you like, with that sort of expectation from their parents.
Exactly. And it's funny, actually, you're absolutely right, Andrew, because, you know, when I was at school, you know, they became so ridiculously famous. It was them and the Beatles, you know what I mean? And it was like, I was almost embarrassed to tell my friends because it was not cool, you know, to have these parents who were so amazingly, they were on telly all the time. And I was like, oh my God, And you know, you're always embarrassed with your parents, aren't you? So
oh, no,
Debbie,
I get it,
Debbie, sorry, excuse me a second there. Debbie, did your not Debbie, what
Dee.
am I doing? I'm doing it again. Dee.
Let me introduce
You know, I was just thinking actually about Debbie, who of course is, you know, co-creator on
Wonderbirds.
And as I was thinking, you know, seeing you and thinking about Debbie and yourself and so on, I just wanted to go back a little bit again in the same way that Debbie, you know, the whole DNA is, you know, from our parents and grandparents and so on. Same sort of thing with you, because you're also remarkably talented. You write music, you write all sorts of articles and books and so on. I mean, you're a very talented woman. And where do you draw on? What do you draw on in order to write a song? What inspires you, for example, to write a song?
Well, it's really weird because I think I was always encouraged, because I grew up in a very creative environment with my parents and my grandparents, who would always really push me to be creative, and we'd always have like a sing song around the piano, and I would always be pushed to do that, and I'd think, you know, I don't know if I'll, but it was like, you know, eating or breathing at my home. So I've always done that. And I think with the writing, I mean, I wrote a musical recently, The Stagecoach, and I was sitting there.
The stage.
It's called The Dream Makers, the musical Dream Makers, and they commissioned me to write it, and I wrote it. It came to me very quickly. I wrote all the music, and they put it on. It was a fantastic experience. When they commissioned me, I thought, my God, I haven't written a musical, but I write music and lyrics. So, but it almost. Creativity, and you know this, Dawn, because you write as well.
I do.
But it comes to you almost like from another world. It's really weird how it happens. And you know, like Paul McCartney, I think he said one of his songs, he woke up and it came to him in a dream. It's almost like that, because it's incredible how it happens. And I think everyone's creative, but not everyone has got the confidence to do that.
And I think
as well, and not everybody.
If you go into, I always think of this, if you go into a classroom of 7-year-olds and say, who can paint? All the children's hand go up. You go to a classroom, a group of adults, and you know, nobody would raise their hand. So creativity, and actually, even in people's later years, is tremendous. And as I said, it's never too late to be who you're meant to be. And what I love, 2007, you were the most promising newcomer. Which is fantastic in the music scene, which is
jazz. That's right. I was doing a lot of jazz, and I still do. And unfortunately, because of lockdown, you can't. But yeah, I was voted the sort of best newcomer in 2007, and then I had my album. I wrote an album which was, you know, had great reviews. So I'm just writing my next album, actually.
Love You Faker. That's what I particularly like the title of that one. So.
Oh, and that's true. I know.
So what was the story? I mean, talking about that sort of side. The other thing, which is a sort of accolade, which you sort of was forced upon you, if you like, is that you were the model for Lady Penelope with those almond eyes and things like that. That's what an iconic sort of British, if you like, institutional, the wonderful lady. And I think you even did the voice of Lady Penelope for a Halifax advert. Is that right?
I did. Well, I mean, thank you for finding all this out. And this is incredible, Andrew, because my mother actually was she created Lady Penelope, the character. And with Mary Turner, Mary Turner sculpted it, but she told her how to do it. But it was my eyes as a young person, a very young person, who almost not born, if I go by the age that I admit to now.
The amoeba of you.
The amoeba, exactly. The amoeba's eyes. So the shape of my eyes, so everything else is my mother's face, but the shape of my eyes are Lady Penelope's. And so my mother created that character. She had fun creating that, because all the aspects of her she kind of got from various people she'd known. And she explained to me how you build a character, which was really, again, really amazing to learn that at a very young age. And then when she sadly passed away, because she had done the voice always, then they came to me to ask me to do the voice, which I now do. And that was the Halifax commercial was the first one I did as Lady Penelope.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, yesterday you were asking Jan Ravens to do her favourite impersonations of women, and I loved her Nicola Sturgeon and Theresa May. That was hilarious.
Isn't she fantastic?
Oh, brilliant. And just that light and shade, which I really love. Am I allowed a moment of indulgence as it's my show? Could I get you to do a Lady Penelope? If Lady Penelope were to mention the Andrew Eborn Show, I would feel really spoilt.
Okay. Well, Andrew, I am so impressed that you've managed to launch this amazing show. But Andrew, please get out the rolls, will you?
Oh, come on. My bucket list is completed and absolutely delight. I love it. I know. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. The other thing which I really love as well is your passion, if you like, for music. We share the passion of music and how music is one of the great healers. And what I love is your thing about music across the world. You did very well with your property portfolio.
Yes.
Tell me about that really important charity that you helped finance effectively.
Yes, well, I ran a charity called Music Across the World because I actually felt that there were a lot of musical instruments that people had in their homes that they didn't use. And so I contacted all the schools. You know, I did a lot of radio shows, and we were sent so many instruments that people had, because a lot of kids start learning and then they get bored. You know, not just recorders, but violins, pianos. That donated so much stuff that I couldn't actually house it in the end. There was so much. There were big pianos and organs and everything arriving in my house. And even so, I managed to actually place them, a lot of them with Bernardos, and some in Kenya, some overseas, with kids who couldn't afford a musical instrument, but showed a talent. Or even if they hadn't, the people would actually, looking after them, would think that they would benefit from music, because, as you say, music is such an amazing healing component.
And we've seen a number of examples of that very recently. We had Paul Harvey, who was the old teacher, who's in his 80s, and he was a composer with dementia. And he basically, as you know, he managed to reconnected, if you like, through music. And he received a donation of £1 million to basically bring his project and compose. And I think he reached #1 and so on and so forth. That was Paul Harvey. And the other great example very recently was that wonderful ballerina. I don't know if you saw the footage. And she's a Spanish ballerina called Marta Saldana. Marta Saldana, who sadly passed away in 2019, but she was a principal ballerina, and she was locked in her world in the darkness of dementia. But they put Swan Lake through the headphones, and it was just such a magical moment as she started dancing the principal ballerina in Swan Lake, and it all came flooding back.
You see, it's music again. It's because I think, you know, I am a Buddhist, and I think the universe is actually based on sound, and I think that's why. And it can actually heal your body. It filtrates through your whole body, and I think and you know, your psyche. Don't you agree, Dawn?
Very much so, and it's renowned for releasing to release dopamine in the brain, which is very calming, and it centers people. And as soon as you've got your brain awash with dopamine, it calms you physically, it reduces your blood pressure, and so on. And an awful lot of people who are involved in the music world actually go on to live longer than many other people, which
they
is
do.
Interesting.
You're absolutely right.
With all their rock and roll and drugs and God knows what.
I know. When you think about it, and I'm not naming names, but when you think about some of those big rock stars, they're still going, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think we know a few of them.
Talking about. Talking about rock stars, we should absolutely mention in passing, because he was the oldest ever person to get to #1. The nation has been celebrating Captain Sir Tom Moore.
Oh my good, I know. I mean, the tributes we've had, you know, through Wonderbirds flooding in and everywhere. He was extraordinary, and isn't it great that he achieved so much for not just for himself, but for the nation. So it's never too late, is it? It's never too late.
I think that's the message, isn't it? Because he was not just a national inspiration, but he was a beacon of hope for the world.
Yes, he was, and still is, isn't he? Absolutely extraordinary.
And his raison d'etre for getting up every morning was because tomorrow could be a better day. And so,
Yes.
so he always felt that tomorrow would be better.
Yes.
So off he'd go and he'd get up and go.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, there was lots of people came up with all sorts of things. Paul Bowen did a song Beneath a Bridge, just with a guitar, and Mike Reed played it on his radio live yesterday morning, which was superb, absolutely beautiful. And then Mike did a poem, in fact, and it was just simple, Captain Tom. And I saw that, Andrew, you'd filmed it and popped it up there for us all to see.
Lovely.
But the words are really moving, and I loved the line, the indomitable Captain Tom.
We love it, and it's got a nice ring about it. No, absolutely. So Mike is we're regular on each other's shows, which is quite fun. But he does this thing called the Radio Laureate, which is great. He often does it in the voice of John Cooper Clarke, who's a wonderful punk poet. That's what I love, the power of words and getting it to a different audience. And I think that's what happens. I mean, we had Amanda Gordon, didn't we, who was at Joe Biden's inauguration. And she, you know, the youth poet laureate, Amanda Gordon. And people forget the names. They always remember the imagery, but they get wherever I can, because people remember that sort of stuff. But Amanda Gordon, she basically spoke for the nation. And what I love about Joe Biden, if you like, is it's a wonderful anagram, isn't it, for be joined. So Joe Biden is be joined. Most people don't realize
of course
that. But if ever there's a moment where we need unity, this is it, isn't it?
Yeah, this is it. Oh, this is amazing. And you have some great guests on your show, Andrew, really, and Dawn. You've managed to get fabulous people, and I'm not surprised, because, you know, this is a great place to sort of talk about stuff and to air all your feelings and, you know, your knowledge and your passions. It's fantastic. It really is.
We said to Debbie when she came on the show, what we'll do, because you equally, like a mutual admiration society, you on Wonderbirds had some fantastic guests. So we're going to change them all over. I know you've got my good mate Russell T Davies coming up as well. Oh, that's going to be brilliant. But you very cleverly, at the last moment, what you do, and I love your bit, because when you're doing your casting on IMDb and things like that, you're sort of set as the wise one, if you like. You're the Prince Charming, aren't you? I looked up on IMDb, and the cast of Wonderbirds, there's you as Prince Charming, but you're also a wise bird, aren't you, with your Wonderbirds?
Yes.
Because the point that you made about Russell T Davies is the knock-on effect for parents listening to their children and both sexes coming out.
Yes.
And really, talk to me about that.
Well, I honestly felt really passionately about that when I saw that series, because I loved the series, and I remember the 80s at the time, and none of us knew what it was. And of course, being in the biz, you know, showbiz, there are a lot of people. We were brought up with a lot of people, creative people, who were gay or, you know, had, you know, were in marriages, although it wasn't allowed at that time. But I felt really strongly with that series about the part that Keely Hawes played. I thought she played it brilliantly as the mum, who really probably kind of knew way back in her psyche, but wouldn't admit it and would just prefer to brush it under the carpet. And I think that's the important thing about now. I think that's the thing, that series, even if it just gets to one person, one parent, he's done his job.
Oh, no, and that's the other thing. As you probably know, I set up this thing called canned laughter. It's okay not to be okay. Yes. And the whole idea about canned laughter, it's empty laughter and it's false. And so often in this profession, the mask of the tragedy and the comedy could never be more apt. And I have a lot of people who, some of whom are big public names, big stars, others of whom are everyday folk who are struggling. And giving them a platform and having them to be very brave about their own struggles. I mean, I had a wonderful actor who's fairly well known anyway, a guy called Tim MacArthur. And he came on, he talked about how he was bullied as a 9-year-old. He realized he was gay very early on. He was bullied at school. He had difficulty coming out. He came down and was bullied at drama school. And all along his journey, he has had torment. And he said it's the first time he's actually publicly spoken about it. and he does a radio show and things like that, and works in that sort of side. But to talk about it, he felt as though it was like therapy for him, even though it's through these interesting platforms. But other people being inspired by that bravery is just really
amazing. And you know, the turnabout to me at the end was when Jill turns around, and you think that she's going to say to the mum, it wasn't, you know, don't worry about it, it's all going to be fine. And she actually, that was the clever bit, where she turned around to the mum and she goes, do you know what, it was your fault as well, because he wouldn't have carried on if he didn't feel so ashamed. You made him feel ashamed because you couldn't accept it and he couldn't tell you. And I think that was the thing that hit me, actually.
That's
about that.
Right. And it's
absolutely,
yeah.
That's absolutely the case. And that's the situation, I think, in all forms of bullying as well. I think when you confront your bullies with something very simple, just by saying, well, yes, I'm gay. So, you know, that's how it is. Get
this is
over
who
it.
I am.
Exactly. And I think when you've got that inner strength to do that, especially if your family have given you that backbone, that's the only backbone we have when we're young, is who we're brought up with, who brings us up. And if those that bring you up make you feel powerful enough to be able to say, well, yeah, okay, I am into music and I play music and I want to be a musician.
Yeah.
You'll grow up and you'll do these things with confidence as well as pride in what you do. And I think that it's the same about sexuality. You know, if you're in fact, there's an interesting psychological thing here. A pretty child, for example, grows up to be quite a confident adult, and the psyche behind that is that when you're walking down the street as a small child, people immediately greet you and go, oh, isn't she lovely, or isn't he gorgeous, what a beautiful child. And so you grow up with this, oh, everybody loves me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, for a lot of people, that isn't the case, whether they are aesthetically challenged or whether they just lack confidence in some way or another. And I mean, you know, it wouldn't be nice, would it, if you were the sort that when people went up to you as a kid, they were always, you, that wouldn't work too well.
Exactly.
But in reality, the confidence that you get from childhood, from home, gives you huge structure, I think, for the rest of your life, how you approach things and whether or not you're likely to get bullied.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, they always say, give me a child to the age of 7, I'll show you the adult.
You're absolutely spot on.
And I think,
and also I think I always say this to people, if they come to me for advice, as people do actually, being the wise owl. And I always say that it's all about self-belief. And it's very difficult to achieve sometimes, but if you've got self-belief, you've got everything. And Yoko said the same, Yoko Ono said, if you believe in yourself, you can conquer the world.
Oh, absolutely. And it's totally that, be yourself because everybody else is taken. And I
absolutely.
I've heard you say that before, Andrew.
Oh, I know. I have
that
my little
so
phrases. It's got to be, but it's true. And I always
love that.
Yeah.
Be yourself. Say that again. Be yourself.
Be yourself because everybody else is taken.
It's a little bit like living on the edge.
Have a t-shirt made, Dee. It's going to be good.
Please, can I have one?
Oh, absolutely. This is what we should do. We should do the D-DNA. We could do this. I know you've got the Wonderbirds, but we could have the D-DNA.
Yes.
That would be rather
excellent. I think that's fabulous.
Why not?
Yes.
The other thing which I genuinely believe in and always an advocate for is that I want us to be the generation that talks about mental health so that the next generation doesn't suffer the stigma. Because
absolutely
you're right. It's not just about people's troubles, bullying and so on and so forth. I had another wonderful guest on, a black artist called Ewood, who grew up loving Michael Jackson, and he's got a brilliant voice, a wonderful singer like yourself, Dee. And and also Dawn. I've heard Dawn's voice.
And me.
Dawn is. I know.
Wonderful singer. But he's a wonderful singer. He grew up wanting to be Michael Jackson, and sadly in 2009, his brother committed suicide. And he never knew why. He'd never had a chance to talk to him about it, but had his own struggles. The way that it manifested itself, he's got his career, he got his career on the normal trajectory. He was getting television. He was on the French equivalent of The Voice and things like that. The industry was starting to recognize him. All of a sudden, in 2014, 5 years later, he lost his voice. And he went along to the psychiatrists and the doctors, and they all said, what's happened, it's effectively post-traumatic stress. All these years later, that has affected your vocal cords. And he was talking about that spiral of depression and the fact
Wow.
that he hadn't had an outlet about it. And if he'd understood what happened, and he'd been bullied at school because he was in France, he was, you know, there was racist comments and all that sort of horrible stuff we're now talking about. But if bullies realise the effect, the devastating effect they have years later,
the impact of,
hopefully it will have an impact, and hopefully people
on the body and everything, the whole psyche. And this is why, you know, I work a lot with sort of well-being, wellness, and I do a lot of meditation, and I do a lot. Actually, the big thing for me is gratitude as well, because I think, you know, we're living in a world where it is a terrible time, but then you think back and you think, you know, I'm so grateful to be here, to be in a place where we moan about this country, but we do get a lot of support, you know, and I think we have to look at all the positives. And as long as we look at the positives, then everything will be okay. And I say that to my daughter, you know, it's a 1 in a trillion sort of % that we're actually here.
Yeah.
So, you know, just be grateful for our lives, which really, we're so lucky, all of us.
I think that's right.
Indeed, we are.
Yeah, another thing we have is that we have a lot of artists who are all locked down at home. That's why we all have fabulous guests, because everybody's delighted to have escapism. We're all zoomed. We're zoomed, as they would say in Dad's Army.
Yes.
But what I love about it is, and a lot of people are reinventing themselves, just as the same way as you've done with your fantastic Wonderbirds. We've got artists doing these great concerts. My good friend Toya with her husband Robert Fripp.
Yes.
Have you seen her videos? Aren't they brilliant?
You know, I have, and you know, in fact, I've got a connection with Toya, because years ago I was in a show in the West End called Trafford Tansy, and it started at the Albany Empire. And I started it out, we sort of did it as a fringe thing, and it was women in a wrestling ring. This was in the 80s, and I had to be trained by Brian Maxine to wrestle. He was the middleweight champion of Britain. And I remember going for the audition and the director saying, well, you have to be a bit fit for this, which I was in those days. And he said, Brian Maxine is going to do a double somersault, you know, throw you in the air. You're going to somersault. Is that all right? I thought, this is a test. No problem. So there it goes. So he gets hold of me, throws me in the, and I do this somersault. I went, oh, you know, landed on my feet, thank goodness. I go, oh my God, I loved it. Can I do it again? And I got the job. And Toya did it after me, actually. So I went into the West End for 6 months. And then Toya took over as Tansy, and she was amazing. And my husband at the time was a theatre director, and he also directed her in a play. So I'd love to meet her again.
Oh no, she's wonderful. And Robert Fripp, who's a legend with King Crimson and the guitar stuff.
Yes.
He worked with David Bowie and things like that. All of that sort of side. I mean,
amazing.
As I say, their videos are just so hilarious. They do sort of Toya's Sunday lunch where they do just a few minutes of wonderful escapism. But it is hilarious. But a lot of musicians, and I know you enjoy performing, and I've seen some of the footage and long for those sort of moments. How do you survive without that sort of feedback from a live
from the audience? I know that's a tough one, because I always sort of do live, even if it's sort of, you know, like small jazz clubs or whatever. I always do them. I do a lot of the Pizza Expresses. I do miss that, but I think because we've got the Zoom thing, and I think that's where we're very lucky. So the feedback really is from like on Wonderbirds with the other ladies, and also the guests coming in, and I do Zoom calls with my friends, and we do a lot of music together. So we've got that facility, which a lot of people don't have. And I think, you know, all these things add up, and we know that it's not going to be forever. So that's, you know, it just keeps, we have to do whatever we can to keep going.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing, actually. We do know it's not going to be forever. And
Yes.
I mean, you and I were talking about this, weren't we? With regard to the fact that, in a way, this has kind of been pressure off a lot of us in some ways, in other ways more pressure, but in a lot of ways less pressure, because we can get on with being creative at home. We can meet online, but you know, even meeting online can be very lonely, I think, for a lot of people. As some of you know, I cook. I love cooking, but I cook great big meals And I bought myself a food vacuum sealing thing. So I seal them up, I label them, and I send them out to friends. And
how wonderful.
Well, these
Can
are
I
friends
have
who
one,
live on their
please?
own. And then yes, of course you can, Dee, of course. And then what I do is I then have a Zoom meeting with them, and I put a little message in there saying what wines would go with them, so they get the right wines. And then we all have dinner together via Zoom
How
parties.
lovely. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
God, that sounds like a great idea.
It is, and you can have around the dinner table. I've seen it. People did Christmas lunch this year where they all had these computers in front of them, didn't they, and playing like celebrity squares, which I love. And well, Dawn has been a regular on the show as well. What I love, we did a Christmas special where in her kitchen she rustled up an omelette, and it was the most bizarre, anarchic bit of television we've seen for a long time. As you probably know, Dawn has this menagerie of glorious animals, and they were all making an appearance, and she was doing an omelette, and Pavarotti, the big cockerel, jumped on and objected to it. During Christmas time, he was pecking away at your door, wasn't he, whilst you were stuffing the turkey?
Yeah, well, actually, it was the window. It was the window in the kitchen. So I have, I've got obviously a section underneath the window there. At the other side is their courtyard, and Pavarotti, he is enormous. He's a huge, very stunning show cockerel, and he's very loud, hence being called Pavarotti. Anyway, he leapt up onto the outside windowsill. Up come his women. I was going to call them something else then, but I won't. Anyway, up come his women, and they're all there looking in, and I felt absolutely dreadful because I had my arms going inside this turkey, stuffing it with all the stuffing. And they were all there just glaring at me, you know.
Oh my God, of course.
Absolutely, it was Hitchcock's The Birds about to happen.
I remember as a kid, my grandparents having a turkey running around called Henrietta. I called it Henrietta. And unfortunately, Henrietta ended up a bit like, you know, the stuffed one. Yeah.
Oh dear.
That was a bit, yeah.
Well, we grew up with lots of animals as well. We used to have about 18 horses, and we had a Henrietta. What a surprise. We also had a Henry, bantams they were. But I used to, for my 7th birthday, I always wanted to have a hippopotamus, but couldn't get a hippopotamus. So the closest thing we could get was a pig. And I knew my parents had already bought me a little pedal car, and they couldn't return it. So they tried to persuade me, say, look, would you like a pedal car or would you like a pig? And I knew they'd already bought the pedal car, so I got that one already banked. So I said, I'd like a pig, please. And I ended up with both.
I had to get that as well.
But the pig was called Harvey, and we kept Harvey for a long time.
Did you?
Yeah, a wonderful pet. And I don't know what happened to Harvey, but he disappeared one day.
Yeah.
Andrew, were you able to eat bacon and sausages when you had Harvey?
I've never had a problem. I've always respected people's views on whatever they want to eat, and I have had some glorious vegan meals, and we love vegan festivals and things like that. But yes, I've never had a problem eating anything, and I will try anything once. Is what I would always.
Yeah.
Well, how about you? Are you vegetarian? I know you're not vegetarian, Dawn. What about yourself, Dee?
No, I'm not particular. Well, I don't eat red meat very much, but I do like the odd roast with lamb, actually, because I do a fabulous roast lamb with rosemary and mango chutney. It's just gorgeous.
Let's do it. After lockdown, let's do it.
And it's the best.
Send it round in packages. Forget lockdown. You do it with delivery.
I'll do that.
We'll have our Sunday lunch with Dee and Dawn. I love that. That'd be brilliant.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing.
It has been such a delight having you on the show, Dee. Thank you so much for being a Lady Penelope for me. I do. That's my moment.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
You can go to your grave happy eventually now.
Oh, I can go to my grave now. Thank you very much. That's
next time, darling. Next time, Andrew, I want to hear your Parker.
Oh yes, well, I don't have a Rolls Royce, but I have something in the same sort of vein, which is good, which is always a thrill. You can hear my Parker. I can do
very good.
On anyway.
You know what we haven't touched on enough here before you head away?
Go on then.
And that is Wonderbirds. I think you're the CEO. You're doing stuff. You're doing all the business stuff for Wonderbirds. You're phenomenal. And
behind the scenes, and Debbie.
And Debbie, of course, and over 7 million views. I mean, it's phenomenal, hugely successful.
The thing is, I think it was Debbie's idea to get us all together, and I think it's all four of us equally who have actually, you know, we've committed to it. We've worked hard to get the best people involved in front of the camera, but also behind the scenes. And I'd like to say a big thank you to them, because without them, it wouldn't be the success it's been, because we've got a fantastic crew of people who work every day diligently to promote it, to get it out there. And of course, we've all got our own following. I mean, Thunderbirds got 100 million followers all over the world. And we've all got great profiles, all four of us, and all of the guests that come on board. But, you know, you can't just sit there and let it all happen. You have to really get, you know, it's you know, not very glamorous behind the scenes. You have to really you have to get your hands dirty and, you know, just get down to the work.
And you're reaping dividends, reaping the rewards now. 7 million. I love all of that. And what I love is the cast as well, because IMDb, you've got Harriet, who's the wicked queen on IMDb.
Yes.
Debbie is Princess Debbie, of course. You've got Sherry, who's the good fairy. And I love the fact that you are Prince Charming, because you have been charming today. We will stay glued. It's available every week, isn't it? 3 times a week at 4:30, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. And we will swap guests, and you should come on here and I'll come on there, and we'll
definitely
share everything. I love sharing.
Of course, and we have Richard Arnold on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, who I adore. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And yeah, we do a special with him.
Wonderful.
And Andrew and Dawn, it's been such a delight. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. And I can't wait to come back and see you again.
The door is always open. Thank you. The DDNA, I love that show. That'll run and run and run.
It will.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Being my guests. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 So thank you very much again to Dawn Parry and the fabulous Dee Anderson. What a delight and what a thrill. My childhood dream, Lady Penelope. And she mentioned my name. What a joy. Anyway, if you'd like to be a guest on the Andrew Eborn Show, write to me at guests@octopustv.com. That's guests@octopustv.com. Don't forget, you can follow me at Andrew Eborn, at Octopus TV, and subscribe on all the usual channels. But until then, thank you again to Dee and Dawn. I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.